at a quick PowerPoint that talks a little bit about the importance of communication in education. And this is an extremely important topic as so much of what we do in education is communication. So we're going to look at chapters 7, 8, and 9, and we're going to also look a little bit more at our family engagement plan. In chapter 7, it discusses good beginnings with parents and children. And of course, it's so important we establish relationships with families from the very beginning of when you meet them, when they come into your program or when they come into your classroom. And one great sample questionnaire is on page 203 in helping to just kind of getting to know the families a little bit better. It's nice to have that questionnaire. And then home visits are also a great first encounter with families. I know a lot of centers that do home visit, especially those that are working with Head Start. That is part of some of their requirements. But it's also great if you're not even a Head Start center to maybe possibly do home visits if that's appropriate for your program. Really get to know the children and their families and the environment in which the children are living. And it just makes for a wonderful start. I used to do that when I taught school, and I love to go in and visit with the children and the parents in their own home environment. And the children loved it because they were so excited to show you their room or to show their specific toys, their favorite things, and they just love to be able to do that. So that is one great way to get to know some of the families in your classroom or in your program. So when there are some of those first encounters with children, you want to help them to adjust to the new classroom. Some great examples are on page 211. And then dealing with separation experiences. How do we help parents and how do we help children? So we're going to prepare our parents first of all because they need to know it's going to happen, and it's good to let them know it's going to happen and then talk about ways that we can work together in helping that separation anxiety and separation experiences that children may have. Make sure that you're always welcoming parents into a classroom. I just really didn't like it when teachers didn't want parents to come into the classroom. I wanted to be a very involved parent as my children were growing up. So I tried to be involved in the classroom as much as possible. So you just want to make sure that you are welcoming to parents in a classroom. Develop children's trust in parents and discuss the separation experiences. So these are ways to help parents and children in the separation times. There's a great summary on page 223 that also covers that topic. And a parent-teacher partnership is strengthened as teachers utilize the following informal communication methods with parents. And this is in chapter 8. And so just developing these important first-time relationships with parents and being able to continue that relationship throughout the school year or throughout the time they're in your program. So daily conversations. There's some wonderful ways that you can converse with parents and families daily. So just greeting parents and greeting each child. I think it's very important. Parents know how much you care about their child when you're stooping down on the child's level and you're greeting the child as they come in every day. And then create expectancy for conversation, letting them know that you're ready to have conversation with them. And then making sure you have those sign in and sign out sheets, which force the parents to actually accompany the children to the classroom, which creates opportunities for conversations. I really don't like those programs that allow the parents to just drop their child off at the door and there's just a teacher waiting outside maybe for the children as they're being dropped off, or as they're right there at the door letting the parents just drop them off at the door and the parents just run off to work. It's not helping us to establish that relationship that we really want to establish and how important that is. So having them actually come into the classroom to sign their child in and out helps again to just have that informal conversation. Just hope you're having a great day, or hope you're going to have a great day. And sometimes I've even had wonderful programs who have coffee there waiting for parents as they come in, and so they can grab a cup of coffee as well. So it's just some good ideas of developing relationships. Telephone calls are a great way to have that informal communication with families. Making sure we're sharing positive personal observations about a child. And then also indicate concern if a child is absent for several days. I had one infant teacher who worked for me at our child care center. She was amazing. She always, even if the child was absent that one day, she is calling right away and finding out, just, we missed your child. Is he okay? Are they sick? And just wanting to let the parents know how concerned she was and how much she loves their child and wants to make sure that they were okay. So just, and those parents so appreciated it. So just making those little telephone calls is just a wonderful way of encouraging parents. Personal notes, just sharing positive personal observations or anecdotes about their child. I remember receiving some of those myself as a parent, and I loved it when they actually said, "Oh, your child said such and such today, and it was so cute," or whatever. Making a personal observation about your child just makes a parent's day when they know how personal you have been with their child. Thinking, just letting parents think that their child is your most important child in the classroom, and you want every parent to feel that way. But refer to children by name rather than your child, and then addressing parents by name. And then also when you're signing notes and stuff, making sure you sign your name. Names are important, and so just using those names really creates that personal bond. And also making sure you find a translator for those whose home language is not English. That's extremely important to make parents, family members feel comfortable and that you care enough about them that you're providing it in their home language. Electronic communication, so many ways that we are now communicating electronically, whether that's email, maybe electronic note at the end of each day, an electronic newsletter, just little reminders that you're sending home, and just like we're using in our class, that remind.com. I know a lot of classrooms that are using that for their own classrooms, or their programs are using that for their programs to just remind parents about things. So that's a great thing to use. And then just personal notes and class websites. These are all electronic ways that you can inform parents. Now again, I would not just use an electronic means by which to communicate with families, but I would also make sure you include those written forms that you hand them as well. Not all families are that savvy when it comes to electronic means of communication, but some are, and they would prefer that way. Even including text messages in this as well is another way of electronic communication a lot of families are using nowadays. Bulletin boards, make them eye-catching. They can be very informative. Don't put too much information on there, but don't put just too little either. You could have some helpful tips on there about how to, a particular child development issue that might be helpful for parents. Could use photos of the children, but change them frequently. If you don't change them frequently enough, parents just start walking right by them. It looks like the same thing to them. I've seen that once. I'm not going to look again. But if you keep it attractive and you change it up, whether it's monthly or every 2 months, but making sure you change it up frequently enough that they're noticing that there's something different there. You want to make it colorful, but not too crowded, so not too much information, but enough that there's something there for them to look at. Having a daily news flash right outside the classroom door or near the main entrance, briefly describing the day's happenings or reminders. You could also use that daily report sheet to do a quick little daily news flash. So keeping something fresh again, so it's not the same, but it's different enough that it's going to catch their eye. Newsletters. Now, there are so many different examples, even in the class that I put in our Moodle course, of some different kinds of newsletters you can use, but make sure they're regular. You know, parents, if it's every week, that they know it's going to come out every Monday or every Tuesday or whatever it might be. Or if it's every month, they know at the beginning of every month they're going to get a newsletter, keeping them regular. Inform families about classroom activities and plans on that newsletter. It also gives parents insights into educational purposes or underlying classroom activities. It's going to enhance children's parents' abilities to communicate with each other. So the parents can communicate with the child they have something to ask their kids about. Say, oh, I remember reading in the newsletter that you're going to be talking about such and such today in class, or this week it's red week, and we need to make sure that you're having your red items, or you're wearing your red shirt on such and such a day, or whatever it might be. It will give them something to talk about. It's also to reinforce and extend learning from school into home so that they know what's happening, and they can help you with reminding students at night, or children at night, of things that they've been learning on, and kind of reviewing it with them. It needs to be fairly short. It needs to be attractive. Color if possible. No more than 1 or 2 pages, because if it gets very lengthy, parents are not going to read it. But it does need to have pictures in there. It needs to be attractive, so it's going to catch their attention and it makes them want to look at it. A very professional appearance is very important, and have someone spell check for you. I don't know how many times I have looked at newsletters and there's misspellings or the grammar is wrong, and at that point I'm like, if that teacher or that program can't publish a professional paper or a newsletter that does not have mistakes in it, wow, that makes me want to just turn that program or that teacher totally off. They need to make sure that you've proofread it carefully, and that that you as a teacher has taken the time to have somebody else look at it, spell check it, proofread it, and that you have taken enough time and energy into that you're making it professional. These are wonderful ideas that are in your textbook as well, but a traveling backpack, libraries, and a circulating literacy activities, just on a rotating basis, give kids get a chance to take a traveling backpack home. There might be fun things in that backpack, and they can take it home, and it's, again, an extension from school to home, and it can support and promote literacy. So looking at page 249 in your textbook. Also, classroom displays are a wonderful way of communicating with families about the things that you're learning. Document panels. I know if you're using a Reggio project approach, they use document panels all the time about displaying the process in which the children are learning about a certain topic. Just a wonderful, exciting way to display the children's work as well as the process of learning. And then just having suggestion boxes for parents as well is another way for informal communication. Chapter 9 talks quite a bit about parent-teacher conferences, which are 4 reasons for holding regular parent-teacher conferences. It's to facilitate a balanced examination of all aspects of development for the child, for the program, for the class, for the parents, to provide uninterrupted time and privacy for conversation between teachers and family members, and to facilitate a free-flowing exchange of questions and information to increase mutual knowledge and respect. That is so important, is to making sure that in a parent conference, it's a way of showing respect to the families, no matter what kind of cultural or background that they might have, that you're showing them respect and that you're wanting to learn from them about their child, as well as then a reciprocal relationship there where you're also sharing with them how things are going in the classroom. And then to provide the opportunity to formulate and coordinate goals and plans for the child. So there's 8 factors that facilitate productive parent-teacher conferences. Making sure you explain the purpose of the conference up front. You also plan for uninterrupted time. You plan a private location so you're not interrupted. You plan goals ahead of time that you're going to discuss. And then you make sure you help parents feel at ease. You're welcoming, you're warm, you're engaging in asking them questions about things about their child. You begin with a positive attitude, and then you encourage parent participation. Then at the end, you summarize things for the parents so they understand what you've talked about, and then what the goals are that you have for the child, and then how you're going to work together to meet those goals. One of the things that I always like to share with our students is to say, you know, one of the best ways in approaching parents, especially if there's a difficult situation with a child, is always use the sandwich approach, where first of all, you're talking about something very positive about the child. You're going over all the positive things. Then you sandwich in between that maybe some of the challenges that you're having with the child, and then what you can do to work on it. And then at the end, again, you finish with some great positive notes and some wonderful things about the child. So it's easier for the parents to handle that maybe not so positive aspect of what's happening in between all the other wonderful things that are going on with their child. There's some pitfalls to avoid during a parent-teacher conference. You want to avoid using technical terminology. Many parents don't understand a lot of the terminology we learned as educators, so we want to make sure we don't use big words and language that they might not understand. You avoid the role of expert, that you're the expert and they're not, so you don't want to do that. And then we avoid negative evaluations. We avoid unprofessional conversations, so we don't talk about things that are not professional. We avoid giving advice. You're not there to be their counselor, so you don't want to give them advice about maybe some marital issues that they're having trouble with. And we avoid rushing into solutions.
You're the parent of a youngster who perhaps isn't doing as well in school as he or she ought to, or you're the teacher of that child, and come Monday morning, you're going to have that dreaded parent-teacher conference. It's enough to raise anybody's blood pressure a point or two, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Clinical psychologist Robin Goodman has some tips to ease the nervousness a little bit on both sides. Why is this such, as a student you're worried about it, parents are always anxious, teachers are anxious?
Everybody, because it's like you're going to be graded or judged. Am I a bad teacher? Am I a bad parent? There's a lot of expectations and now pressure on everybody for the future, which is unfortunate. And this stuff is triggers. It's like, did you have a good experience when you were a student?
Right.
And now you're the parent, so you bring a lot of that into the room.
So you really have to prepare going in. This isn't something you should go into cold. You should really think about it.
Right, especially involve whoever needs to be involved. Like if you're, a divorced parent, make sure you ask questions of the other one, or have you both get there on time and be there together, and write down what your questions are. So think about some of this ahead of time before you even get in the door.
And once the dreaded day comes, there's a lot of things that both sides really want to get accomplished, right. The parents and the teachers. The first thing is play well with others. What do you mean? We hear that all the time in school, but what does that mean?
Exactly. You want to get to know the other person, understand what their position is. Put yourself in that teacher's shoes. They may be, your child is one of 30. They have a lot to do that year, a lot to do that night. So really be specific about what you want. And the teacher also needs to understand that you're so anxious about that student and you really want the best for that student.
You talk about listen and learn. This is something, again, that applies to both sides in this meeting, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Because what you have to realize is your teacher is seeing your child in lots of other situations. I read a statistic that, by the time they're 18, 13% of their time is spent in school. So you know what? You want to share information. At home, they have trouble procrastinating. But at school, you may want to find out, how do they get along with peers? How do they follow directions? And share that information. You also want to be careful about the kind of parent you are. Are you a bully parent? Are you test obsessed? Try and talk about those things in a more realistic way with the teacher.
And at the end of the day, this really is a team effort, isn't it? You really have to collaborate with one another to do what's best for the student.
You also want to know what that means is you want to know what the expectations are. So are you supposed to have your child know how to read by the end of the year, or what's the expectation and the grade performance for that year? What are the homework requirements? How much should you be involved? And also problem solve if there's something that you're concerned about with your child.
What do you want to avoid? What don't you want to do in one of these meetings?
You don't want to blame, you don't want to accuse, don't want to go in there with barrels blazing. One thing I heard from an educator is think about a reality sandwich. So for both sides, what you want to do is sandwich some criticism, maybe between two really positive things. Like my student loves being here, but he's having trouble in science, and I know he's getting along great with the other kids in the class. So think about that reality sandwich.
And then once it's all over, it really isn't over, because really this is just sort of the beginning of a process. It's the beginning of things that you've talked about. You really have to follow through with what's been talked about, both the teacher and the parents.
Exactly. If there's a homework planner you're supposed to use, if there's something you want to do about the tests that are coming up, see if those strategies are working. And the other really big thing is talk to that student when you get home.